But we begin tonight with small but important signs of hope for our 248-year-old democracy. Yes, it remains under severe threat from Donald Trump and his Christian Nationalist Party. Just not for the reasons that he's telling you. What is set to begin in a Manhattan courtroom Monday morning is not an attack on democracy, as Trump is leading his cult members to believe. It's actually a sign of its health and evidence that it can still function the way it was intended to. To help explain, I want to take a brief trip to Italy and introduce you to Silvio Berlusconi, the country's longest-serving prime minister and a former media baron. He was caught in an endless string of investigations during his time in politics and was ultimately indicted for embezzlement, tax fraud, bribery, abuse of office, and underage prostitution. While Berlusconi was able to get out of just about all of the charges against him, he did ultimately face accountability and was convicted. 81 years ago, Italy was run by fascists. Today, it is a functioning democracy. And Berlusconi's conviction is evidence of that. In fact, we've seen plenty of democracies prosecute former heads of state, including France's Nicolas Sarkozy for charges including corruption and illegal campaign financing, South Korea's Park Geun-hye for bribery and coercion, and South Africa's Jacob Zuma for contempt of court tied to a corruption inquiry. Just last month, Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro was indicted for allegedly falsifying data related to COVID vaccinations while he was president. And of course, when it comes to current indictments, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remains under a criminal indictment for corruption, even as he currently leads the country and Israel's harrowing war in Gaza. Some might say he's keeping that disastrous war going to push back the start of his trial even. But this is a thing that happens in democracies. If a head of state is found to have committed a crime, they're prosecuted, just like any other citizen. Because in a democracy, there are no kings, no dictators, no one is above the law. The principle of equal justice under the law, which is engraved on the front of the United States Supreme Court, is no less true here in this democracy. And on Monday, Donald Trump will see it function firsthand as his hush money election interference trial gets underway. Now, ironically, it's in the same courtroom where the Central Park Five were prosecuted as teenagers for a sexual crime they actually didn't commit. A group who were exonerated after Trump, who was recently found civilly liable for sexual abuse, called for their executions. Irony has a strong sense of humor. And in the last few hours, Judge Juan Marchand shot down one of Trump's last remaining motions to try to delay this trial. Trump's claim of pretrial publicity in which Trump was seeking an indefinite adjournment. In his order, Marchand points to Trump's own public statements for much of the publicity that is out there, writing, the situation defendant finds himself in now is not new to him, and at least in part of his own doing. The judge also agreed that the solution would come next week by conducting a thorough, thoughtful, and effective voir dire during jury selection. And yes, that case that starts on Monday is historic, the first criminal trial of a former president. But what Trump wants you to believe is that somehow that threatens democracy. It doesn't. What does threaten it is his effort to stoke the flames of chaos. One of his campaign fundraising emails this morning refers to the start of the trial on Monday and declares 72 hours until all hell breaks loose. Now, you'll recall that the last time someone in Trump's inner circle said all hell would break loose, it was Steve Bannon on his podcast the day before the January 6th insurrection. Still, in the courtroom, unlike on Capitol Hill back in 2021, all hell will not break loose. In fact, it will run just like any other criminal trial. Trump will be required to sit in the courtroom every single day while his lawyers conduct the trial. He'll be expected to behave himself, and he will be presented with a presumption of innocence before the jury. A jury, by the way, that will likely hear directly from Trump.
Testify your trial in New York.
Yeah, I would testify, absolutely. It's a scam. It's a scam. That's not a trial. That's not a trial. That's a scam.
And look, if the prosecutors can't prove that you did it, Donald, you'll get off. You'll walk scot-free. See? Democracy. Now, outside the courtroom, all bets are off. The Secret Service and the New York Police Department are already making special security arrangements in preparation for whatever happens and whoever decides to show up. The wild card, of course, is the defendant. Trump will surely not shy away from cameras outside the courtroom, where he can continue his attacks on the judge, the prosecutors, the witnesses, maybe even the jury. But inside that courtroom, democracy will prevail. Joining me now is Katie Phang, MSNBC legal contributor and host of the Katie Phang Show on MSNBC. Glenn Kirshner, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. And Bobby Ghosh, senior editor at Bloomberg. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to just go right down the line and start with you, Katie. Because the thing is that Monday, as madcap as I'm expecting it to be, and I'm assuming you and Glenn will be hostages inside of one NBC News bureau or another, you're not going to be able to leave all day because you're going to be covering it all day. But that might actually be the most normal thing that we've seen relating to Trump, really since 2016. Him going into a courtroom and being not arraigned, but him facing jury selection like any other citizen. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think that's important, Joy, to point out, because if you look at the style of the case, and the style is the name, it's the people of New York, right, versus Donald J. Trump, he doesn't get the benefit of President Trump. As we know, annoyingly, his lawyers consistently refer to him as President Trump in legal filings and when they speak about him in court. But it is the humbling moments when he has to sit at counsel's table, not by choice, but by law and required procedure, when he is referred to as criminal defendant Donald Trump, that the playing field is truly leveled. And that is when accountability comes a knockin' and hard. Because the voir dire process, the jury selection process, all the way to the verdict being rendered against him is something that affects thousands of Americans on a daily basis. And so regardless of how much he wants to have all hell break loose outside, there will be a silence that will be happening in that courtroom, because Donald Trump will not be in the driver's seat. Judge Juan Merchan will be controlling his courtroom as he does, and Donald Trump will not have any free rein to act out when he's in court, and he will have to, again, sit humbly and quietly while the judicial system does its work.
Yeah, something he's not used to doing. And Glenn, I mean, we've just been covering, obviously, the death of O.J. Simpson. You know, that was sort of a monumental trial of the century in the 21st century. What do you think that we in the media should have learned from that spectacle that I remember? I was telling Chris Hayes the other day, I was 25 years old on maternity leave. So I watched the trial like I felt like I was the 13th member of the jury. But what do you think that we in the media should learn from that coverage of spectacle? Because the way in which Trump is not like every other American is the same way O.J. was not like every other American. He's a celebrity. And on top of that, he's a former president. What should we learn what should we think about as we're watching that spectacle?
You know, I think we should focus on the fact that the rule of law matters. The rule of law is one of the things that makes this country great, that makes us a civilized people. And I firmly believe we're in a really important moment, because our nation will be stronger for a former president of the United States who committed all kinds of crimes. He's indicted 88 times over. The evidence, in my assessment, even that's just been publicly reported, is overwhelming. And our nation will be stronger once our lived experience is that even a former president of the United States can be put through a fair judicial process, and a jury of his peers, a jury of ordinary citizens, will be in a position to decide whether the admissible evidence proves his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I believe he'll be held accountable. I believe he'll be convicted. But one way or another, our nation will come out the other side of this so much stronger for just having gone through the exercise of putting a criminal former president on trial.
Yeah. And, you know, Bobby, I wanted to bring you in. I know you've written a lot about this because I think it is a normalizing thing. I think Americans sometimes want exceptionalism so badly that they forget we're part of the world, you know, and I thought of Berlusconi because, you know, Rula Gibril, who you and I both know very well, who's a great journalist and who's done a lot of, a lot of her journalism in Italy. You know, she's the one who first told me, you know, Trump is America's Berlusconi, very similar sort of larger than life media kind of character. And his that was a humbling moment for one of the most powerful men ever in Italy's history. What does it say to you, just as someone who's covered the international sort of media world and international politics, that Donald Trump is going to meet the same kind of system of justice that he had to?
Well, it would be a terrific advertisement for American democracy if when you put the former president on trial. We're talking about how it will be perceived in this country, how New Yorkers will see it, how his supporters will see it. But I'm thinking of how the world will see it. And the world will see American democracy, which we like to preach to the rest of the world. The world will see American democracy, the American justice system in action. And I think the world will welcome that. You talk of Berlusconi, Jacques Chirac of France was convicted. 3 presidents in a row in Brazil, 3 presidents in South Korea. These are not sort of, to use a slightly unpopular phrase, these are not banana republics. These are thriving democracies. And it's a good thing for a democracy to show everybody within the country, and because we're United States, to show the wider world that in a democracy, the systems of justice work independently from the political process. That it does not matter how popular, never mind that he was a former president, it does not matter how popular a person is, how famous he is, that he has to go through the same system of accountability and justice as you or me. That's very, very important. That's a fantastic, as I said at the top, fantastic advertisement for American democracy to the world.
Yeah, and we need it because January 6th looks like the opposite.
I'm going to announce to you today, here standing alongside President Trump, that we will do everything within our power to ensure that we do have free and fair elections in this country. If we don't have that in a constitutional republic, we have nothing. It's the basis of who we are as a nation, and we owe that to the American people. And so what we're going to do is introduce legislation to require that every single person who registers to vote in a federal election must prove that they're an American citizen first.
Yep, those prominent election deniers have a plan to further undermine our elections by trying to make voting harder. Now, before I go any further, non-citizens, zoom in on me here, cannot vote in federal elections and have not been able to do so for decades. It's literally illegal. Literally. Also, it was Donald Trump who tried to steal the 2020 election with help from Congressman Mike Johnson, who helped recruit 125 House Republicans to sign on to a legal brief that asked the Supreme Court to overturn Biden's wins in 4 key states. Johnson, using his credentials as a constitutional lawyer, also helped formulate the legal theory to decertify the election on January 6th. So no, maybe don't take their recommendations seriously, unless you have a deal with the RNC to pay for your legal fees. Because that can happen if you're in the family. Back with me, Molly Jong-Fast and Jay Jordan. People who are not, you can't vote in an American election if you're non-citizen. The end.
Going to Mar-a-Lago to investigate election integrity, that's like listening to More Money, More Problems to find out if Diddy did it. What are we doing? I think they have a bias there. You went to Mar-a-Lago to say, we're going to make sure these things are above and beyond legality.
Yeah, right. They're not illegal. They're illegal, so we're going to do a law to make them more illegal.
Yeah, my favorite part of this is, did they not know there was this law? I mean, the Republicans are really good. Next week they have all these appliance laws, right?
The appliance laws are
Next week is appliance law in Congress. I mean, Mike Johnson with his 1-vote majority is so, if he were not who he is, I would feel bad for him. Yeah. But he goes down there. He looks like, you could tell this was Trump's idea. It just was so...
do the thumbs up. Right. They're doing the Freon in the Fridge Protection Act. They let our gas stoves survive. They're literally doing that.
The gas stove
I think that Mike Johnson and Trump should do what Mike Johnson and his son did and just keep each other accountable on what porn they watch.
Keep it accountable on the porn. Well, that's in the trial next week. We're going to talk about porn next week. And then the lady, I love her, by the way. I think she's amazing. Stormy. Well, let's talk about the Chicken Shack Trump moment. Trump, because you want to appeal to the blacks, you've already done sneakers. Now let's do chicken. Let's play it.
We've also knocked doors for you in the past for your past re-election bid and when you ran the first time. Yeah. I was interning for the GAGOP at that time. So, doing a lot for your tax credit reform bill and everything like that.
Well, we took care of those colleges.
Sure did. Much better than Biden did. So I want to This is Clark Atlanta. This is Spelman. This is Morehouse. This is Morris Brown. They all came.
Isn't that great?
So I don't care what the media tells you, Mr. Trump. We support you.
We love you.
Okay, 4 p.m. We've been 4 p.m.
Come here, let me give you a hug.
Please do.
Bless her, Candace Hart. Spellman and Morehouse Democrats put out a statement saying our goal is to simply reiterate our unequivocal beliefs about our beloved HBCUs. We do not support white supremacists. We do not support convicted predators. We do not support voter suppression. We do not support liars. We do not support fascism. Do not speak for us. I'm going to just tell you, as somebody who worked on campaigns, Secret Service has to go through that room. They're not just going to let anyone in there unless they're pre-screened. That lady said she was an intern for the Republican Party of Georgia. She used to work for Candace Owens' little firm, her little thing, Blexit. Right. She's a plant, so we know that. And everyone in that room was pre-screened to be in that room. This was not him walking into a chicken shack and people being like, Trump!
Also, you know he stole a couple of Polynesian sauces before he left.
He did. You know he did. And doesn't know what to do with them.
And also, I'm surprised he didn't try to go on Sunday because he doesn't know when they're open.
The idea that he's so desperate to show that the blacks love Trump. I had so many people. I don't go on Twitter anymore because it's too Nazi.
What?
But there were people on there trying to get my attention by being like, oh, Joel Reid is going to hate to see Donald Trump hugging a black. She's going to be enraged.
Exactly like that.
Oh, yeah, you know they were shaking like that when they said it.
It's just so, it's like fundamentally so upsetting to think that this is, man says all this racist stuff, he does all this racist stuff, and then he thinks he can go to a restaurant and
let's be clear. He thinks he can go to a chicken restaurant.
Restaurant.
Fill it with black people and go, see, they love me.
They love me. And
they love me almost as much as they love this chicken. That's what I wanted to say.
And I will put it on the other side that, even things like, okay, the Biden administration is going to put out their own list of things they have actually done for African Americans, $7 billion, affordable housing. You've got to me, the big thing is the loan forgiveness.
Right. Yes.
That's actually a big deal. $153 billion in student loan forgiveness.
More today.
Right. Trump has tried to be like the first step back is me. That was literally a black congresswoman who did the first step. He signed it. He's trying to take credit for things, but there is this question.
Well, he freed Lil Wayne. Is that enough?
Well,
pardon Lil Wayne.
And he's very...
And ASAP, well, he got ASAP Rocky out of Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
That was hard.
Listen.
That's tough. Sweden can be tough. Sweden's a difficult place to be incarcerated. He got him home. He freed ASAP Rocky. But, there is that meme that Republicans are so desperate to prove that the blacks love them now. That women love them. That everyone loves what they're doing.
Well, I think they should start by probably enacting policies that would actually help black people and women. And, hear me out, black women. I don't even know. And I do think that the Biden campaign is starting to feel a little bit more confident.
Yeah.
Because as Trump becomes more incoherent and as this abortion thing becomes an absolute dumpster fire.
Yeah.
I think that gives Democrats some more confidence if people turn out.
Well, when you hear Trump talk, he is not a gifted orator. He has never been a gifted orator, but he does seem a little weirder than
cognitive issues.
Maybe. He seems tired, and he doesn't seem the sort of same. In 2016, he was able to go from place to place to place.
Sure.
He doesn't quite make that kind of movement yet, and he somehow thinks that 3 weeks of a trial is going to really elevate him with swing voters. I just don't see the math.
Not knowing whether Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi, which is which.
Yeah. Yes.
Might not mean you're in the strongest caucus.
Also, we can't even skip over the fact that why is he in Atlanta? Because he's during a criminal case. He's not just hanging out in Atlanta. There's a criminal case.
He went for the chicken.
He didn't go for the chicken.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.